Hello to everybody. We just wait 1 minute till when everybody is online. I just want to introduce myself if somebody doesn't know me. My name is Maria Vittoria Grassi. I'm talking from the headquarters of Grassi Pietre, which is in Nanto, which is north of Italy, near Vicenza. And the person who will draw this basically this webinar is Giorgio Valentini, who is from New Jersey. So thanks, Giorgio. I just hope that you will have a nice time together with us. And well, just have a nice, just here to Giorgio, and I hope we will share some comments at the end together. Giorgio?
Good. Good. Thank you, Maria Vittoria. And thank you, everybody, for coming back. It's sort of becoming a little bit of a usual habit. And after suspending for the summer holiday, we need to warm up a little bit the engine. So with Giacomo, we thought about something kind of light, like the first day of school, going to school, see your friends, and have a small introduction, hopefully still inspiring. As the title says, is the trip into the, villas and sailing along the canal and the Brenta River. I hope you can see my screen while we're waiting. A few others that might want to join us. I would recommend also for you to become familiar with the tools. Why don't you in the Q&A, just or in the chat, just tell us where you're logging in from so that we have a little bit of an interaction. While you're doing that, without further ado, I will probably start on the presentation. I won't see you, unfortunately. So again, if you have any questions or if I'm going too fast, anything, I need to sort of catch up again, and I don't remember the little tricks of this webinar. So if you let me know in the chat, and you, Maria Vittoria, interrupt me because I won't be able to see what the people are chatting. So we, of course, start thanking Palladio, which has been the main topic of the spring presentation. I don't know how much more we can talk about him because we sort of extracted anything that we possibly knew about Palladio. I mean, I'm sure there's so much more, but remember that we are not an architectural or historical lecture here. We are more, people selling tiles. So, and so on, of course. We want to thank him for his contribution, but also because in the future we want to remain on the topics of architecture and so on. Probably not much.
Giorgio, sorry, you have to stay stable because otherwise we really don't hear you. The voice really messed up.
Okay.
Try your best as
let me try with the headphones that probably are reducing the. Sorry, I didn't think about this. Let's see if I can improve this way. And now they're connected to my phone. I gotta unlock it. I apologize for this. Anyway, okay. So in the future, we're not going to be talking too much about Palladio, but we do have other architects and historians, and they definitely receive the influence and the input that they put in architectures. One more second that I'm trying to connect the Bluetooth, and hopefully you can hear better. So, can you still hear me now?
Yeah.
We start from our postcard in the Grand Canal, and here is the Rialto River, and then we are moving to the Ponte dell'Accademia, where we can see in the main. Let me see if I can put the pointers here. Okay, this is Santa Maria della Salute, and it's a very prominent church. We discussed, we touched a little bit in the previous one where we talk about the religious architecture in Palladio. And we want to go a little bit deeper, probably around Halloween, because there are some interesting kind of about this church. The architect was not that much of a religious one, so yeah, it's something that we'll dig deeper in November. Punta della Dogana is the tip here, and you can see behind that is the Canale della Giudecca. Sorry if I'm looking and sideways, but I have to screen, and sometimes I need to see where I'm pointing the mouse. And this is Palazzo Vernier de Leoni, which is now the Museum Guggenheim. So this is Venice, and you can see here the Grand Canal and the Canale della Giudecca. So following the canal, we are basically crossing over the lagoon and arriving into the Brenta River. The Brenta River and the complex of the boats and canal is actually all this infrastructure here. As you can see, the Brenta is a river that sort of, streams down the Alps and goes into the Adriatic. The original river was actually going this way and get out into the lagoon, not directly to the Adriatic, but back in these when they constructed this infrastructure, and we are going into the 1600, also with the actually even before that, because Leonardo da Vinci was a big part of the construction and the engineering of the rivers. And that was rerouted, sending the river outside directly to the Adriatic Sea. And now they use the river bed to create this canal with all the villas. Yes.
Sorry, I think we lost the last words. Now it's good again. I don't know if it's a connection problem, might be. I'm sorry. You can just try now.
Okay, hopefully it's working. We had all these villas and this many. We highlighted 7 in this presentation, maybe 8 villa, but this villa all over the place. And actually, the grassy forest is kind of on this side, and a little bit more on the west. And we have another Barbara, and at the end, Giacomo will.
Giorgio, I don't know. Giorgio, can you try without? I don't know if it's a headphone, but really, it's you cannot understand any word. I'm sorry.
Let me see.
Now it's better. I mean, I think it's the headset. I think.
Let's try. Much better now.
Interrupt you 10 times.
Hey, we gotta get back into that. And can you hear me better now?
That's much better. If you stay like there, it's much better. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Hopefully you understood that this system was basically developed to bring, first of all, construction material, but also the goods and the and anything that Venice needs from the mainland into the city. Of course, no longer used nowadays, but a good idea. I think in 1960, the tourist entity basically developed this Burkiello, which is a river cruise over the canal, and starting with the historical idea of using those old boats. These are the Burchielli. There are actually 2 kinds of boats. The Burchielli, Burchielli, sorry, for the passengers and the mail, and the Burci, which were the boats used to transport the goods and the materials. We started from the Fusina, which is where the lagoon basically starts, and we go all the way up to Padua. Those Burci, once in the river, were pulled by horses and ropes. And back then, of course, nowadays, towards the latest days of their use, they've been converted, especially in the 1800s, with the advent of the diesel engine and the steels. So many of these are actually had been abandoned over the time. But what is interesting is also the shape of these boats that typically are more like a shoebox because, of course, they don't have to sail into open water, so there's no waves. They had to have a very shallow bottom because the lagoon and the river is not that deep. And at the same time, they need to load as much as possible. So it was important to have a very square face more than the typical V shape that the boats usually that we know have. And this is an example over the centuries, and where the boat has been abandoned is actually a little loop in the Sile River. I think is a little bit north of the Brenta, is more in the Treviso area. Which is actually a national park. So recall a little bit of the Everglades. The extension is 15,000 square meters, so about 4 acres, if I don't recall. Like I said, the latest use of the Burci was probably 40, 50 years ago, as you can see from some of those pictures in black and white. This is a reproduction image of Canaletto in 1730-35, and you can see that the same kind of boat now have more of, I don't know, something where you can live, you can stay inside and enjoy the ride, also because from Padova to Venice, which now probably takes 20, half an hour probably on the highway, back then was a full day. And of course, these noblemen, when they were leaving their main residence in Venice to go to the countryside, they want to do it, in kind of styles. So that's why all those lavish decorations and uses. Here is other example of other paintings of the time, and you can see that of course they use the goods because when you're moving for the summer holidays, you take all your necessity with you. Other images with the locks, because of course in order to have the canal being used in both ways, you need to create locks, and here are different examples of what they were. Today's is actually this one, and when they started in 1960, it's kind of funny because they used one of the vaporetto. Vaporetto are those, the boats, which are actually, the equivalent of the buses in the regular city, but in Venice are both for transport people from one side of the for public transportation, basically. So they first started with one of those vaporetti and taken the passengers, and now they have different boats like these ones. That sails along the rivers, and it's a kind of a very interesting ride. It takes a full day, so it's definitely a more, not the typical tourist destination, because like I said, probably in a day you can see a couple of villas. You can't really see more than those. So starting here from Mira, this is, let's assume that we left Venice, we crossed over the lagoon, and now we are entering the rivers, and this is how the canal is starting. And this is the view that you will see from the boat. Is actually very low level because, of course, the water level is below the street levels. So it's actually interesting seeing cities from a different perspective, from a much lower high levels. You can see the city center, you can see the countryside, of course. And the very first villa we get to is Villafuscari. Here is a reproduction of the 4 books of architectures from Palladio. So definitely this is the Palladian villa. Not all of these villas that we are seeing have been designed by Palladio, but definitely all of them has been inspired and follow the philosophy of the Palladian villa. Foscari is probably, together with Villa Pisani, one of the 2 most famous villas. So if you have to pick and choose either one of those or at least both of them, I will recommend you. But there's many more. That, like I said, we're going to probably see 7 on this webinar. This was also called the La Malcontenta because the legend says that, first of all, belonged to the Foscari family, and Alvise Foscari was a very famous nobleman, which actually became doges, one of the most important doges of Venice. So the very prominent family. And apparently the wife of one of these Fuscari was not really living up to the conjugal duty. So they lock her up in this house, and that's why it's called the Malcontenta. Other than the legend, it's pretty interesting. The pedestal here on the villa is particularly high and much higher than all the others Palladian villa, because this villa doesn't have any basement. And like any Palladian villa, we saw this, I think, in the Jefferson and Palladio. Palladio built in his philosophy of architecture, the villa has to have a function for the farm and for the landscape. And another important part of looking at this villa is not just the architecture of the building itself, but also the setting where the building is located. Most of them are inside the park. Just the fact of being on the river of next to the river, to the Brenta rivers, is another nice and interesting site. Another important point about this villa was actually hosted the reception of Henry III of France in 1574. So there's a lot of interesting aspects. This is the back of the villa, and you can see that even on the back side, there's a lot of attention to the details. And unlike many of the construction and architecture of the time, where we're pretty much focusing on the facade and not giving too much attention to details in the back. The interior, like all of them, of course, very richly renovated and decorated. These are actually frescoes by Battista Franco and Giambattista Velotti. And they were, like many of these villas, primarily focusing on the saloon at the center that, of course, were used for hosting parties and hospitalities. These are aerial view, and like I said, you can see that the settings of the villa is actually very interesting on top of the architecture itself. All of these villas sort of have its own ups and downs, and the luxury that you're seeing now is, sort of we try to reproduce or renovate it to the original intention, but through their history, they also went up and down. And in 1933, actually, Byron visited the villa and wrote about that was actually being restored because few years earlier, the villa was at the point of ruin, doorless, windowless, used more as a storage for grain, and maybe used more as a warehouse than an actual villa. On top of that, were demolished by the Austrian troops in the 1848. So, like I said, the villa had a couple of different owners and also went into different up and downs. Among some of his visitors, we have Le Corbusier, Winston Churchill, and many others. So definitely an important part of the system. Leaving the villa, we keep on sailing the canal and we are arriving to Oriago di Mira. Oriago, we find Villa Mocenigo. It's probably not the most famous one, but it's unique because of this very elongated shape. This, you see the front and the back, again, it's well renovated, is the headquarters of International Study of Economics and Curious for the University of Ca' Foscari. So all these villas nowadays have a purpose. They're not abandoned, some are private, some are more public. And the history here is the Mocenigo family had a lot of factories and mills in this area, the area of Dolo, and they decided to build their own mansion here so they can more comfortably oversee their productions. This is other view. You can see that the palace is basically only 2 floors, and those 15 axes make it pretty much very low profile and very long. And keep on sailing up the river. We are going to Villa Valmarana. We discussed this villa again into the Jefferson together with Villa Emo. And it's very famous in particular for the two barchesse. The barchesse are the two sides of the villa that, of course, were always being used as a storage for tools and warehousing, farming produce. Now, of course, they've been renovated and they actually been used for hosting parties like weddings and receptions. The gardens are also very important, like anything on these villas. And some of these ideas are actually from Giorgio Massari and Giovanni Scalfarotto that converted some of these guest houses, some of these barchesse into guest houses. These are the details of the gardens. And not to least the porches. The porches here features the floor in rosso, siago, and biancone. Those are two stones, two marbles that, as you can see here, they are very prominent and very important in decoration, and actually also very strong in terms of technical characteristics. But unfortunately, nowadays, at least in the American market, don't have the prestige of many other markets, but is actually one of those materials that is still fairly available and very valuable. I tend to think that is more the way has been promoted lately, that each quarry try to sell as much as possible, and in going this race for price and be the most competitive, we kind of, they kind of devalue this material. But you can see that it's a very precious one and gives great decoration. Sort of like the Soave and the Amarone, two great wines that are from, the Veneto regions. But while the Amarone, they contained the production and they kept the prices up, and now you can't find a bottle below $60. The Soave, which is still a very good wine, you can find it probably for a couple of euros in Italy, although nowadays they understood that it's better to contain the policy, the production, and keep the prices up. So hopefully they're going to do the same with the Biancone and the Rosso Siago. Going back on the boat, we are going to Mira, and we got into Villa Widman. It's definitely more unique because we are losing this neoclassical and style that the typical Palladian architecture have. This is more of a French influence, and also the owner, Napoleon's had a little influence on this villa, but also majority of the owner were from Milan, which get a lot of French influence, and that's why the villa, besides it's been converted and restored into different styles throughout its own centuries. And nowadays is also the office of the tourist promotion agency. In 1984, was bought from a foreclosure. So can you believe that some of these places went in foreclosures? And again, among his guests, Carlo Goldoni, Igor Stravinsky, Gabriele D'Annunzio. So nice prominent figures. Despite the facade is more of the French, the plant still keep the square cross that the typical Palladian villa has. And again, the setting and the landscaping where the villa sits, it gives also very much of the Palladian style of construction. The barchesse make these are not attached to the villa, unlike many of the Palladian ones, but they are separate, and that's why we should be looking more of a complex than an actual single building here. And then it's interesting also the statues that are done with Pietra di Vicenza, our stones that are pretty much scattered around the gardens. And then the interior, like any others, but this is probably one, if not the most decorated villa of all the rivers villas. Also the terrazzo, the battuto veneziano that you're seeing on the floor is very much similar to our Pietranova. It's a style that is coming more and more popular nowadays. Here we see some of the exterior and the porches. And now we are getting to Villa Santorini Toderini Fini. This is a Venetian villa that unfortunately is no longer here in July 2015. And I remember I was in Italy back then. I used to live about 2 hours south of this villa. And I remember still today the day, which I never really experienced such a strong wind. And again, I was 3 hours away. But this villa was completely impacted by the tornado, and this is what happened to the villa. They are discussing restorations, but it's of course not. This is an image you can see from the fire department just after it happened. So the situation definitely is no longer the way you can see here. But restoring an antique villa is not as simple because you can't just rebuild it. You have to rebuild to certain standards and using the original material, which is some of the requests that we are receiving of giving them the stone, since most of the Palladian stone come from our quarry. We are continuing our route to Padua, and we are getting to Stra. In Stra, we find Villafuscari. Style is pretty much the same as many of the others. Was built in 1599 by Giacomo Foscarini, again a very important political figures in the 16th century. He was originally a prosecuting attorney and later became Doge of Venice. It's not really sure who was the architect here, but many drawings are from Vincenzo Scamozzi, and that's why the influence is much of the Palladian styles. But apparently it's not his villa, or doesn't say that it is. What the other important point are actually these little turrets here that has an influence that Masco Foscarini received through his trip in Europe. He was also ambassador for the Serenissima into different European states. And this is sort of a recognizing of his illumination, the way he called it. The villa is now privately owned, and it's also given out, also in this case, for banquets and weddings. The interior, of course, are great settings. This is typically divided in 2 floors, and one of these, the main thing is the central room. Nowadays, is also a museum of footwear. The villa belongs to Rossi Moda. Rossi Moda is a maison founded in 1942 and is one of the main brands in luxury footwears. So it's interesting because here in one single place, we kind of bring together 2 major peculiarities of the Riviera del Brenta, the shoes production and the villas. Now the museum has a collection of about 1,500 examples of high fashion women's shoes. So I'm sure it's the mass destination for some of this lady that they want to travel here. You can see collection from Dior, Calvin Klein, Saint Laurent, Fendi, Gucci, Donna Karan. The more the better. Last but definitely not least, we get to Stra in Villa Pisani, and you can see this monumental place. And again, the landscape, even being inside, sort of surrounded by the loop that the Brenta River is creating, it gives such a magnitude frame to this imposing palace. The patrician family Pisani commissioned a number of villas, but this is definitely the most important one. Now it's a national museum and is sponsored a lot of different exhibitions. You can see that this garden, if you remember when we studied also, when we discussed I Dormienti, I have a little pictures. A lot of the statue here, when we discussed the garden, get the influence of this villa. Also, it was bought by Napoleon in the 1807. So definitely is a villa that has his up and down history. The Pisani family, although they were a very prominent family, also went into poverty. Great losses in gambling. So even back then, this was one of the problems. And also in 1814, it became the House of the Habsburg, which transformed this villa into the vacation place for the European aristocracy of the time. And in 1934, so about 100 years later, he hosted the first meeting of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini after the riots in Austria. There's so much history, and again, I can't really, list every single one. I try to highlight the most important one. Here is another image of the pool where you can see these dormienti. These were actually also done in Pietra di Vicenza, and again, if you're interested into the gardens, the previous webinar was actually very much focused on that. The importance of this villa, another peculiarity of this villa has 114 different rooms because it was the 114th Doges of Venice. So they kind of want to give sort of a number that recalls him. Now they're primarily empty, and the two most important ones are, of course, the Napoleon room, which is, the name of the occupant that make it is important, but also there's a lot of furniture from the Habsburg period. And the other one is, of course, is the main entrance in the saloon, where it can host parties and gala events. The gardens, you can see, you saw it from the aerial view, but you can see here that it's spectacular, and there's a lot of different details like the maze that definitely worth a visit, and even here deserve at least 3-4 hours. But now we are getting to the end of our trip in Padova. This is the arrival of the Burkiello, and if you can recall, for those of you that were in the 7th webinar in Stone and Garden, this is Prato della Valle, one of the most important, not important, but definitely interesting squares, because it's all surrounded by canals in the downtown Venice. And this, I give the words to Giacomo, that will talk a little bit about Villa Barbaran, which is in Nadia, Palladian villa, that he has more experience on what to say about it. So Giacomo, if you want to take it over from here.
Thank you, Giorgio. Can you give me the screen?
Sure. Now let me stop the sharing here. All yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. For first, I would like to show you. This is the marble Giorgio was talking about. This is the rosso Asiago. It's quite common here. Maybe you're familiar with the Asiago cheese, but the Asiago for us is also a name of a marble. So it is plenty all over here. But let's return to our villas. And as you may say, as you may know, that we have got our private villa. This is Villa Barbaran. And we are doing as well a restoration for this villa. And the villa belongs now to the Grassi's family. And we are now deeply involved in the first step of restoration. And this restoration is becoming more and more funny and more difficult, because we are discovering a lot of new things about the building. We thought the complex was from the early Renaissance, but we discovered at the end that from statements which dated the villa to the Middle Age. So this villa was not only a villa, was a former lazaret, was a former gunpowder workshop, a farm as well. And now we are trying to understand how to manage the wall restoration, because it is not easy at all to move in such deep in history. We have got nice frescoes, but they are quite ruined right now. And discovering all the documents that we're studying about, we found out that our bosses, my bosses, they got a title of nobility in the past. So I'm not allowed to call them by name, and I have to say milady and my lord. So it is very not easy now to deal with. So we have got two problems. One is the restoration, and the other one is the relationship now. But if you want to know more, we have got now the site, which is villabarbaram.com. It's coming in English, and it is a very working in progress website, because we are, as I told you, we are dealing with many matters that we are combined to. But I think that we will come out in somehow. Thank you again for your time here, and don't miss the next webinars that I don't know what we are talking about, but I think they will be very interesting, I hope. Don't miss the Halloween issue.
Thank you, Giacomo. I'm catching up with everybody on the chat, and I kind of love it. I don't know if I can answer all the questions because I don't remember what I said and other things. There was one asking about the stone, and I love to see everybody coming from all over the place. I believe Giacomo already answered to that specific question, but if there's other question now, you can probably unmute yourself. I mean, it's sort of like
one question is Burci and Burkiello were for safety issue, not really, because they were not fast at all. But because it's being in Venice at the time is like being in a highway. You may find from I don't know, Tesla to an old Volvo, everything there, and like having few autos. And the boats, they were very different one from another, and they had different purposes. So gondola is not for goods, Burcis were.
Another little thought that I want to add, and I would like to get your comments. We have been discussing how to try to promote this webinar and this interaction. Like I said, we don't pretend to be teaching architecture or teaching history, but we try to give you a connection between our stone, what we do, our landscape, and geography and tourism, and sort of see in Italy beyond the typical Venice, Rome, and Florence, 2 days, quick trip, being there, done that. One idea is actually to take a few of you that have been participating, and we're trying to, sort of develop a contest that makes sense, according to, how many have been here, contributed, probably are working with the materials on the stone, and take a handful of people to Italy and sort of visit all these magnificent places that probably you're not going to do if you're going on your own on a typical tourist trip. In next year, there's Salone del Mobile, and the idea was probably to do something in conjunction. So for those of you that are going to the Salone as your work, or maybe further down, of course, depends also how the pandemic is panning out. But Italy is definitely going in the right trajectory, and we hope that the whole world at one point is going to get over this, and we're going to go back to traveling and business as usual. So these are some of the ideas that we have here. We're still up in the air because you can understand that there are costs involved. There are trades off here and there, and we don't really know. We try to do it in the proper way that makes sense for everybody. So any idea you can provide us, you can write us privately. Giacomo, if you want to share the contacts, I suppose they all have it, or you can email us. Other than that, I don't know what else to add for this webinar, and seeing you next time, I believe in 3 weeks, right?
Yeah, some sort of. But I've got some other questions. Sorry, is that the razzo was common for villas in Venice? Yes, if you enter the Venetian palaces, you may find the terrazzo as they were. They are still the historical terrazzos. But the terrazzo is much more complicated than having an siago or a marble flooring. So in the churches, you will find these kind of two colors, the red and the white. But it is more common because the terrazzo was more on vogue at the time. So you may find villas, terrazzo, and churches and other buildings more than white and the red marble. How much stone come from Istria, Croatia? So they have got Venice. We may find Pietro d'Istria or Giallo Istria. It's quite common in Venice having, because Croatia and Istria, in the past, they were Venetians. They belong to the same republic.
There's also, I probably made some confusion when I was talking about the Amarone and the Rosso Biancone and the Rosso Siago. If you want to describe that, I saw one of those comments. I can't remember from who.
No, it is because geologically speaking, Verona and Venice, Verona and Venice and Vicenza in the middle, they are quite close. So the Rosso Verona and the Rosso Asiago, they are run from the same area. So they are quite similar in color and in features.
Yeah, but I also let me explain that part probably. Somebody was asking if there's a stone called Amarone. I don't know. It might be. People here tend to be funny, and it's typical in the industry to change name to the stone. It's a sort of more a commercial practice, because whoever is selling you stone don't want you to Google and go directly to the quarry, so that they sort of lose the sales, because they think you're going direct. We sort of have, as much as we respect our customer, that probably some of you are here, we want to trace the stone so that, everything is legit. And we want to call the stone for the name that they have, rather than changing names like is typical. Here, when I gave you the analogy, I kind of wanted to do an analogy between the Rosso Asiago and the Biancone and the wine analogy. In wine, there's, I'm not a wine connoisseur, but there's two wine. One is Amarone, which is a very strong red wine and very expensive, but very good too. And another one that is from the Verona area, and another one is Soave, which is a white wine. It's very good, but at the same token, it's very cheap, because a few years ago, the different canteen were producing as much as possible. We're just selling the Soave. So Soave is sort of an image of a cheap wine, but it's actually very good. And the same things, these things happen because of bad commercial practices. With the Amarone, they created a consortium. They decided how much to produce and where to sell it, and sort of all agree together. With the Soave, what happened, all the different canteens were sort of competing for market places and market shares. And so they devalue the quality of the cost of the wine, actually the price of the wine, that eventually devalue the cost and devalue the quality. And now they realize that that is not the correct strategy. So they're trying to create a consortium, and they did. And actually the value of the Soave is becoming a little bit more pricey for the quality that is, which rightfully deserve it because of this quality. The same thing kind of happened to the rosso siago and to the biancone. They're two great stones that you can see that in history have been used extensively and have very nice decoration and have very great technical characteristics. But if you buy from somebody locally here in the United States, they probably don't carry it because they don't want to sell it, because it's like, what do you want? Just a biancone. It's such a very devalued quality of stone, which to me has its own purpose. And, unlike many of the stones that are very much sought after, like the Bianco Carrara, the Calacatta, which definitely, have a cost because of also the scarcity and the difficulty of getting the right material. But, there's many other materials that are not as famous, but as well as good. And, I don't want to give you a full lecture on stone here, but we can discuss it more privately if you want to know more about one stone or the other. We can certainly talk more about this than historical architecture. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye to everybody.